and welcome to another edition of the Batchelor News Report. I'm LA Batchelor. We thank you for joining us wherever you're listening, wherever you are. We really appreciate you. If you are a YouTuber, please do subscribe to our YouTube page. It's Pad Nation One, Pad Nation One, and YouTube. Of course, if Facebook is the same thing, Pad Nation One at YouTube. I mean at Facebook, LA Bachelor at TikTok, and anywhere else you can find a podcast. I'm going to bring in my guest. Always good to have him on. He is the chief of police in Minnesota. He is Chief Virgil Green. And Chief, appreciate you coming on, bro.
Hey, anytime, LA. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
No worries. Um, One of the things that people have said to me, and I've thought about it, is if people have a substance abuse problem, um, normally, not criminally, but normal circumstances, you know, they get help. So, what is the difference if a officer stops someone and gets them for DUI or whatever? Because it's almost like when you watch a lot of that interaction when cops pull them over, the person who's drunk is they're not making sense because they're
Mhm.
inebriated.
Yeah.
So and then you'll get officers that'll argue with them, and then they get a DUI, and then they go to jail, not to somewhere like substance to get help. So why not have those type of arrests? You know, the punishment be help, not jail.
Well, LA, I mean, it's a good question. And, I can tell you, with me having the background that I have and also uh, serving for a little over almost close to 2 years as the Oklahoma executive director for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, um, I have a passion about people who, well, I'm not going to say a passion. I'm going to say I have a concern for people who get behind the wheel of a car and drink and drive because it is very preventable. Uh, this is something that people they make a choice to get behind the wheel of a car and to drive themselves home or wherever they think they can drive themselves. And oftentimes, LA, you have people who enable that. They know that this individual is extremely intoxicated and should not be driving a car, but they don't take the time to take the keys from them and take them home or give them a, nowadays you can call an Uber or a Lyft. Some 20 years ago you had to call a taxi, and so you know to answer your question, if a officer stops somebody, determines that that person is under the influence of alcohol or some other kind of substance, and they get arrested. Now, it's left up to the courts to uh, determine what type of sentencing or what type of help that person needs. Now, if this is a first time offender, um, there's a lot of states who have pretty strict mandates. And I'll have to share this with you. I know when I was the executive director for MAD and still being a police chief, you know, we were pushing for first time offenders to have a ignition interlock because I go back to this LA that I've seen so many people have lost their lives. So many families have gotten a knock on the door from somebody like me or from a state trooper to say, unfortunately, I'm here to give you bad news because your loved ones was killed in an accident, and it was because of a drunk driver. And so, so many states have laws that if you're a first time offender, you're going to get a initial interlock. If you're a second or third time offender, you may get that. But now the courts are going to say you need to go to some type of substance, um, you know, uh, counseling to get some kind of help, because apparently you've got an alcohol problem or you got a drug problem, and so you're going to get some kind of help uh, to help you um, manage that problem, and hopefully to make a person clean and sober.
Yeah, I understand that. Excuse me. What about the one that just goes out, parties too hard, and gets a DUI? In other words, what's the difference, if any, of someone who's a repeat offender or someone who, just did well? I mean, just the difference between someone over and indulging and then
Hmm.
getting behind the wheel.
Well, I'm gonna say this, LA. And again, I think it is very preventable from a person getting behind the wheel of a car, trying to drive home, knowing that they've had too much to drink, and the chances of them um, getting into a fatality accident is pretty high. And when I say high, I'm talking, you know, um, percentage wise, you're looking at well over 50% that person may become involved in an accident that may result in a fatality. And so, let's say you give an example of a person going out, saying that let's say they're celebrating, getting some kind of promotion, or they're celebrating with with friends for whatever the occasion may be, and they've had a little bit too much to drink, and all of a sudden they say, "Hey, I can drive home. I'm good. I can drive," and they get pulled over by a police officer, and it's determined that that person is under the influence of alcohol. Now, a person is going to get, now either a person is going to consent to seeing what their alcohol level is, or they're going to say no. And in many states, you can either lose your license if you refuse, and most likely a person is going to go to jail. Uh, there's been occasions, LA, into the listeners, where officers have a lot of discretion. And some of that discretion is based on who that person may be. If that person is a political figure or in the community, or turns out that that person may be a friend of that officer, and they call somebody to pick this person up and take them home. Um, Now, I will say this, LA, and as we have this conversation, I'm gonna go back to something that happened to me over 20 years ago in Oklahoma City. Uh, I was working at a place off duty. A gentleman had drove up, and it was at a Sonic uh, restaurant. A Sonic. If a lot of people don't know what Sonic is, it's a famous place. It's well known in Oklahoma, throughout parts of the country. It's an Oklahoma-based country, but
Yeah,
uh,
we have it on the East Coast. Yeah.
yeah. And so this gentleman pulled up. He ordered some food, and he hit the side of the order display. And so I walked up to him, and clearly could immediately tell that he had been drinking too much. And he was probably, LA, in his 70s.
Mm.
And so I asked him, where he lived, asked him for his phone number. He gave me his phone number, and he begged me and pleaded with me, LA, please, Chief, do not call my wife.
Mm.
I'd rather go to jail if you're going
Mm.
to call my wife. And I said, what do you mean? And he was like, man, we were at the house, we were having, our kids were over, and I just wanted to come to Sonic and get a hamburger. And I just live, maybe 5 or 6 blocks from here. And I looked at him and I said, and I wished I could remember his name. And I said, I wish, I have seen so many people who have taken chances like this here, and it ends up deadly. And and so I said, I tell you what, I'm gonna have to call your wife. I said, I don't want to see you go to jail. I don't see a 70-year-old man who's the age of my grandfather going to jail for drinking and driving. And I called his wife. His son answered the phone. Called his house. His son answered the phone. Told him who I was, and he gave the phone to his. The son gave his phone to his mother, and told her where I was at. And they were looking for him. And long story short, they came and got him. They drove his truck home, and a week later, not even a week later, he shows up at the police department where I'm the police chief at. And he was extremely grateful and thankful and said to me, young man, what you did is something that probably would not have happened with anybody else who don't look like you and I. And I said, you're probably right. He said, but you did something and you saved my life. And he said, if I do drink, I will drink at home, and somebody's going to take my keys, but I will never get behind the wheel of a car and drink. And I'm going to actually work on stop drinking. And so that moment, it changed that man's life, has changed his family life. And so not every situation like that will happen that way, LA. And I think, again, I go back to, I don't, I don't have a lot of compassion for people who get behind the wheel of a car and drink and drive, because I've seen too many families uh, that get that knock on the door, and it's not a good knock.
Yeah, you're right. We're talking with Chief Virgil Green here on the Batchelor News Report. But Chief, let me ask you this, that because um, do you think it's kind of unfair that officer, discretion is used in the situations? Because it then you got this snooty kid that got pulled over, with the attitude they rich, maybe they get off just like you allowed this man to call his wife. I mean, you called his wife rather than write him up. Like, it seems this kind of unbalanced. It should, I guess I'm asking, should it not be officer discretion? It should be everything across the board, even across the board.
Well, LA, and I think when it comes to, and I'm gonna go back, this situation that I just shared with you and explained was a little different. The guy was on private property. He was not on a street, um, and so that kind of made the circumstances a little different. And but I will say I'm not making any excuses, because I have a very uh, a stance on drinking and driving. And I think, officers do have that discretion to decide what is the best thing to do in that situation with that individual person. And like I said, I think a lot of people will say, well, you may get some rich kid, and his mom and dad is well known, and they've got money, and so he's going to get called. They're going to get called. They're going to come get him, and he's going to go right back and do the same thing again.
Mm.
Now I think, when if that officer determines that this person has been arrested multiple times for drinking and driving, and they use that discretion and let this person, you know, kind of give him a pass, that's not right. And you ask the question, should everybody be treated the same? And I'm gonna say, yeah. everybody should be treated the same. But we give officers a lot of latitude for some discretion. Um, and give an example. Let's say this person that they pull over has a passenger in the car, and the officer may determine that the passenger is not under the influence of alcohol, but the driver is, and that officer allows that passenger to drive the vehicle and take that person home. Um, is that is anything wrong with that? At the end of the day, that officer had that discretion. They made that choice, but I go back to there has to be some things to consider. If that person has a history of drinking and driving, that person is not going to get a slap on the wrist from me and say, hey, call somebody, have somebody come get you. No, because you've had a pattern of this, and you've shown that you've already been to court and you continue to drink and drive, and that is uh, a serious offense.
And I guess what I'm saying, like if, first offense, um, outpatient classes or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Second offense, um, license revoked. I mean, a set standard from one to God knows whatever somebody would have.
Yeah. Well, I say, LA, a lot of that is determined once that person is in the court. A judge will determine if this person needs some kind of outpatient treatment, uh, and this may be a condition to reduce this from a DUI down to some lesser of offense, because it may be that person's first time. That judge has uh, some flexibility inside of his courtroom. Now, there are some states that have some pretty strict guidelines that judges have to follow, and a judge may not be able to do that. A judge may be able to say, you're ordered to go to this treatment, and you're ordered to go to a victims impact panel, and you're ordered to do a number of things. And if you complete all of those things, then your license will not be suspended, and you'll be on probation for 6 months or a year. And if you don't have any other, you know, violations in that time frame, then that DUI conviction is removed. And so, again, I think if it's a person's first time offense and they go to court, uh, that judge has a lot of latitude to do something to get that person some help.
We're talking with, of course, Chief Virgil Green. Um, Chief, I want to ask you this, but I don't want to sound insensitive in regards to it, but I'm asking it from an economic standpoint.
Okay.
So in Connecticut, when I was a kid, we had toll booths, and the metropolitan area there, New York, um, Connecticut, Massachusetts, all those areas had toll booths. You pay
Mm-hmm.
to come in, you pay to get back, and all that stuff. And then I was probably 14. There was a car that he was a drunk driver that was on the highway trying to go to the toll booth, hit a couple of cars, killed a couple of people in the toll booths, and MAD came in and shut it down. No more toll booths, nothing. So a lot of Connecticut people that I know back home still are upset that you can come through Connecticut, but when you get to these other cities and states, you can't. And it killed a huge percentage of the economy in Connecticut. So I guess my question is, from an economic standpoint, do you being with Matt, do you guys kind of consider that when you take a stand? Because Matt is very powerful, as of course you know.
Yeah.
So do you guys take those things into consideration?
Well, I want to clarify. I'm not with Matt. Haven't been with Matt in over 20 something years. But 20 years ago, I served as the executive director
Right.
uh, for the Oklahoma Matt office. Um, I want to kind of go back and ask you. You said Matt came in and shut it down. When you said it came in and shut it down, are you referring to people being able to pass drive through the toll booths?
Yeah, they took the toll. Connecticut hasn't had toll booths since, I don't know, maybe 35 years, 40 years.
So when they took the toll booths away, was there any what replaced the toll booths?
Nothing.
Anything? Nothing. So the toll booths were there to people had to stop and pay
Right.
to go through, but there was a person who uh, came through the toll booth who was under the influence of alcohol, hit some people, ended up injuring and killing some people. And Matt came in and said, "Hey, you all need to get rid of the toll booths." Was that because of a safety reason? I'm trying to.
It was because of the horrific accident, and it
Okay.
was a drunk driver who caused it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know enough to really because that really doesn't make any sense. If there's toll booths there and there's an accident and Matt came in and said, "Hey, state or Connecticut, you all need to remove the toll booths." Um,
Right. So it's safety reasons they came in.
yeah,
Um, but of course, they got involved because it was a drunk
drunk
driver,
driving. Yeah,
and they lobbied this bill to just stop, stop having the toll booth. Period.
yeah. Well, and Matt has had a very long history of being actively involved in uh, state legislation and federal legislation when it comes to drinking and driving laws. And so they do have there is a lot of influence and has been a lot of influence um, over the last 40 years. I know a good friend of mine, LA, served as the president for MAD is and his sons was killed by a drunk driver in their residential neighborhood, and he became actively involved with MAD and rose up to become the president, the first black president to lead MAD. And so, um, and but this situation in Connecticut, if it had some economic impacts on that community as a result of MAD uh, pushing for these toll booths to removed, um, that's something, I'm definitely going to, after the podcast, looking, see what was behind that, because that's really, um, that's kind of strange that they took that stance. And the fact that, I think you asked the question, do they take in considerations how they may impact the economy? And it sounds like it definitely did. People lost their jobs and there was a loss of revenue because people didn't have to stop and pay the toll.
Right. And that's what I was just asking because you're right. And I think I said 40 years, and you said they've been powerful for 40 years. So that's about the right math. Um, but safety is important. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong. I was just asking the
yeah,
question.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, and, Ellen, I think this is a good conversation. I think we all have heard of I don't I've personally known people who have lost family members and other people that they know to people who are drinking and driving, and the person who's drinking and driving, um, they go, they get arrested, they go to jail, they may go to the hospital, but they walk away. Um, and it is just I can there are so many stories that I can share with you about people, you know, getting just driving home, getting off of work, and a person driving down the interstate the wrong way and hitting a person head on and killing them. Uh, and so I think it's real important for people to uh, be very aware of when they do drink, they get out and drink, and that they don't take the chance, because it's taking a chance. And I go back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast, is that this is 100% preventable. And I've talked about this. We talked about it with you, and I've talked about it on our podcast as well. Is that this is something that can be prevented because of how many lives are lost every year behind people who do drink and drive.
Yeah, I agree. Um, and like you said, it's a topic that people need to talk about. Chief, what about Uber and Lyft? Most major cities have those. So if you don't have transportation, um, and you don't want to get behind the wheel, you call an Uber or Lyft and you get the ride home, or a friend. But mostly now it's Uber and Lyft.
Mm-hmm.
How much does it hurt people? Well, they hurting themselves or doing it to themselves. But how many DUIs could be prevented? I guess if people in rural areas had access to like a Uber or a Lyft.
Uh, and I think in rural areas, it is a concern because you have people who don't have access to that type of a ride share service to get them home. Um, and I'll have to, there are just as many fatality accidents that happen in rural areas as well as does in suburban areas because of that one simple reason. LA people don't have, they can't pick up the phone, and or they can't go to an app and request uh, a Lyft or an Uber. They can only call a friend, and even in those areas there's not even a cab service. And so um, you do find a lot of people who uh, just get behind the wheel of a car and drive home. And I have to say, in there's just as many accidents and fatalities that happen on rural county roads because people uh, don't have the access to those type of rideshare programs. But I go back to somebody knows that person, and somebody knows that that person is has had too much to drink. In LA, I've talked to a lot of people, especially in rural areas, because I served for 12 years as a police chief in Boley, Oklahoma, a rural city about 65 miles from Oklahoma City. And there was some clubs around, and people would go hang out, and they would drink, and they would get in the car at 2 o'clock in the morning and try to drive home. And oftentimes we would find people passed out on the side of the road or ended up in a ditch. And so I started having these conversations with people about the fact that you know have you ever thought about somebody coming and knocking on your door at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's a state trooper or a police officer or a sheriff deputy to tell you that your wife is not coming home because somebody hit her and killed her.
Mm.
And when I have when I've had those conversations with people, LA, they it hits them, and they instantly understand the impact, and they say, well, I've never thought about it that way. And I said, but just think about that let's just say you left that club and you're driving home and your 16-year-old daughter is leaving work and she's on her way home, and you all are both going the same place, but she's coming from a different direction, and you hit and kill her. And it is something that people will say, oh man, that'll never happen. Don't never say it'll never happen. And when you explain it to people like that, LA, it's some kind of way it connects with them. And I said, because that could either be you or it could be a total stranger.
Mm,
And uh and, and so people will say, you know what, Chief, I will have somebody take me home
mm.
if I get that, if I if I'm under the influence of alcohol that much. And I tell people, for women, it only takes one glass of wine for you to
Mm.
blow a point oh 0.08 to be considered legally drunk.
Doesn't matter weight, height, size,
It,
anything.
it depending on a woman's height, her weight, she may have one or two cocktails and she could blow a point oh 0.08 or above and be considered legally drunk. In many states, anything above a point oh 0.08, you are legally under the influence of alcohol. And so, men have a high tolerance of alcohol consumption.
But does it be determined the same way with women, height, weight?
It it can, but you had some people who, man, they've consumed. And I go back, it's just, if you're drinking alcohol, you're drinking beer, at some point that everything has alcohol in it, and you are going to become uh, what we say inebriated, and you're not going to be able to walk and stand still. You're not going to be able to make quick decisions. And so we've seen, like, I go back to, a lot of women have been arrested, and they'll say, I've only had one drink. And actually, I had a, a former an ex family member who called me, who was out with some friends celebrating. I want to say it was a Christmas party or Thanksgiving, and she got pulled over, and she said, I only had no more than a glass of wine.
Wow.
And I told her, I said, that one glass of wine cost you a lot of money.
Mm.
So yes, it does, depending on a person's weight, their male or female, uh, will determine how much blood alcohol level they have in their system.
All right, Chief. One of the new things I want to do with you when you come on is do a quick segment. Ask the Chief.
Ask the
A-
chief. Okay.
Ask the Chief.
All
and,
right.
and we'll push our audience to ask the chief. So right now, my first one is, if you get pulled over for speeding, let's say whatever, but and I don't know if it's different states, you get pulled over for speeding, you stop the car, cop comes over and says license registration,
Mm-hmm.
and so are you required to do so? And if they say get out the car, how does that work? Are you required to do that as well? Because there's been some confusion when some people I talk to that think, one thing and think the other.
Yeah. Well, LA, this is a topic that has caused a lot of controversy. What is a lawful traffic stop, or what is an unlawful traffic stop? When should a person be asked to get out of a vehicle, and why should they get out of the vehicle? once again, I go back to, the way we train police officers, and, we give officers a lot of discretion. I have to say that I have pulled over a lot of people during my time as being a patrol officer before I became a police chief. And even being a police chief, I still have pulled people over on traffic stops.
Hmm.
It is very rare, and I have to say, in my 25 plus years of being in this profession, that I've actually felt a reason to ask, not pull, let me rephrase that, to ask somebody to get out of a vehicle. Um, and that one time that I asked somebody to get out of the vehicle was because there was a weapon that I could see up underneath the seat.
Wow.
And the person knew that that weapon was there. And I said, "Hey, do you mind getting out of the car?" I said, and I was real cool about it. I just said, "Hey, listen, man, I like to talk to people outside of the car." I said, and I went back and I used this. I said, "Man, I've seen so many police officers and so many people get hit rear-ended by people who are not paying attention, and they see the flashing lights, and that light draws them to rear end the police car or hit the vehicle that's being pulled over." And I said, "So, man, I just, want you to get out the car for your safety and my safety." And I said, at the end of the day, I want to make sure you go home safe.
Right.
And I think it's how you approach people and how you talk to people. And he got out the car and he said, "Hey, ain't no problem." And once we get out the car, I said, "Listen, man," I said, "I'm gonna ask you this question. Is there anything in that car that I need to know about?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I got a gun up underneath the seat."
Mm.
And I said, "I gave you a reason why I wanted you to get out of the car." And I said, "You were respectful, and not everybody is respectful. People will argue with you."
Mm.
And I said, "But now you so again, it is something that people will argue with a police officer about getting out of the car, not getting out the car. And but in that situation, the person got out the car, end up writing them a ticket and basically saying, listen, you know, if you're going to have, you have a right to carry a firearm, but put that firearm somewhere where it's secured and safe. I said, because the next police officer is not going to be as nice as I am.
Well, I experienced a situation in Florida when I was coming from a radio station I worked at, and I came to a stop sign and kept going, and a sheriff got behind me and pulled me over. And in Connecticut, if you get pulled over and you ask what's the problem, officer, they'll give you an explanation. But when I was living in Florida, he asked for it. I said, I'm used to Connecticut. I'm thinking that. I said, well, why you pull me over? And we went back and forth. He eventually knew I worked at the radio station. So then he's like, look, man, in Florida, if officer asks you for your license and registration, you're supposed to give it to him, no questions asked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, in LA, a lot of people don't know what their laws are.
Right.
And, if an officer asks you, for your license and registration, it shouldn't be a big deal to give that. And technology now uh, gives officers instant information about a person's, about that vehicle. So you don't really ask people about their registration or even their insurance, because technology will show that person either has the insurance or doesn't have the insurance.
Right.
And so again, I guess it kind of goes back to that, how that officer was trained or what their policies are. But in a lot of states, if an officer asks you for your, license and registration, you need to produce that. And a lot of people don't understand that your license really,
I didn't.
yeah. Well, and a lot of people don't understand this, LA. Your license really don't belong to you. They belong to the state that issued the license to you.
Yeah, it's a privilege. I got
It's
it.
a, and so I think a lot of people will argue and say, "Well, these are my license." Well, guess what? That state can revoke your license and do whatever they want to do, and you don't have a license. And and so I think again, and this is something that we need to have much more conversations about, and just educating the public about what their rights are, how they should talk to the officer, and what's more important, LA, is how the police officer should be talking to the person that they're pulling over.
Right.
Um, and if that police officer walks up and has a very aggressive attitude and is very disrespectful, he's already escalated that traffic stop to something that he's now going to have to be try to regain some kind of control over it, because you and I know, I mean, we're all grown adults. Nobody wants to be talked to in a disrespectful way.
Right. And you're right. And the officer is supposed to be the professional.
Yeah.
And that's one of the issues that people have. And you're already mad because you got pulled over, and then you get an
Hmm.
officer that you want to be a tough guy or whatever the case may be. So, but
Yeah.
I digress. Chief, before you go, let people know about your show, You and the Law.
Yeah. So You and the Law podcast comes on live every Thursday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We stream live on Facebook Live, as well as our You and the Law podcast YouTube page. And we stream live on LinkedIn as well. And so, if you got some listeners out there who follow the Bachelor Pad Nation, definitely please check out You and the Law podcast. We have been on for about 5 years now, and we have a lot of open and honest conversations like you have on your podcast about topics that's related to policing. And we just, keep it, real and honest. And because again, it's all about educating the public and answering questions that need to be answered, and how can we make sure that people understand what their rights are, because we do have some police officers out here who they think they know what they're doing, but they don't. And then when something bad happens, um, it gets put on YouTube and TikTok and becomes a viral video.
Right.
So, we want to just educate the public and have some honest, open conversations about issues that's going on in policing. And so, if you follow, go to our Facebook page, like it, follow us, or definitely go to our YouTube, subscribe, and check out some of our previous podcasts, and drop some comments, and let me know what you think.
And I think you're on TikTok, right?
Yeah, we
Yep.
also have a TikTok page. Yeah,
Yep, I saw you there.
yeah, yeah. So any kind of way to connect with the public is what I'm trying to do with Unity Law podcast. When I first started this, I was with my good friend and who we're the founders and host of the show, Keith Humphrey, but he's no longer with the podcast. And so, I'm just continuing on what we've been doing for the past 5 years, and just having these conversations about a profession that needs to change. And we need to have conversations about how we um, communicate with the public, and especially from people who look like you and I, LA, because there's not that many of us in this profession, and it's not that many of us having these type of conversations about policing.
Well, I appreciate your honesty because it's really admirable for you to speak out, because you put it on the line, being a chief of color. So kudos to you. Chief, for doing what you do. And let's get
Thank
you
you.
on again next week. I got Ask the Chief questions coming to you pretty soon.
All right, sounds good, man. Anytime. My pleasure always.
All right. Thanks, Chief.
All right, thank you.
All right. Chief Virgil Green in Minnesota, talking about, the question of, should people who are arrested for DUIs go to a, say, clinic or program, or should it be a criminal go to jail offense? Let me bring in my good friend Gary Norris. Greg, Gary, I appreciate you coming on, sir.
Hey, hold on. I'm gonna go it again. I'm cooking my dinner, man. Cooking dinner.
Gotcha. See, I'm keeping you on your toes.
What's up, man?
I asked the question. The question Chief Virgil Green was on, and the question was: should people who are arrested for DUIs get treatment on first offense or go to jail? And should it be across the board? First offense, second offense, third offense, and no with no discretion. I mean, no, you know, wiggle room. I mean, it's the standard would be the standard.
Well, I lost a friend. Got T-boned by a DUI, so I might be the wrong person to ask that question because no, drinking and driving it should be a no-brainer. I mean, it should be. You do it once, okay, we give you a pass. You do it twice, you go to jail. That's what I believe.
So you said you get it once, you get what?
You get a pass.
You get a pass.
Yeah, you do it one time. You get
Then
it
you don't
once.
want them to get even treatment the first time,
You go to counseling.
right? And the second time you go to jail.
Yep, because you know better. You know better.
Third time,
Oh, third time, you throw away the keys.
like a
You throw
felony.
away the keys. What happens? This friend of mine who's drinking and driving, he done it over and over again.
Mm.
And I told him, "Hey, you can't be doing this." And got arrested for DUI. And the thing is, alcohol is a drug. It told me to treat alcohol as a drug and not as a party thing. It won't change anything.
I
It won't
guess it,
change.
I guess, and we'll leave with this comment of you can answer that that some people feel like people with DUIs get treated worse than people with drugs.
That's,
Um,
that's not true.
I mean, and so the person brought up fentanyl, and things of that nature. Heck, you can, get caught with weed and probably get less time than if you got a DUI.
That's not true. That's not. DUI, you get so many breaks. In my opinion, you get so many breaks with DUIs. Like I said, you do it once, you get a pass. You do it twice, it's time for you to go.
Mm, yeah, I mean, it's a heavy debate. You said it should be a no-brainer, but I'm telling you, in the circles I am, you have these progressive folks that look at things, from
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
treatment perspective. So that's the kind of conversations I've been hearing.
No, drinking is a serious problem in America. America is not taking responsibility for it.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem.
Yeah. Gary Norris, great. Thank you, man. We'll talk next time, sir.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right. Gary Norris Gray, of course, on the Batchelor News Report. That's going to do it for us. Don't forget, if you're a YouTuber, please, please, please go to YouTube, our YouTube page, Pad Nation 1, PADNATION 1, Pad Nation 1 at YouTube, Pad Nation at Facebook, LA Bachelor at TikTok, LA Bachelor at Instagram. Enjoy. We will talk with you soon.